She ran, the only sound her own ragged breath, tearing through the moonless dark. Each gasp a prayer, each footfall on the unforgiving earth, carrying her further from the man who thought he owned her. Behind her lay Redemption Gulch, and the brutal Sheriff Brody, whose chilling proposal of marriage felt more like a cage slamming shut. Ahead lay the whispering wilderness the townsfolk called Cheyenne territory, a place deemed certain death. But what terror awaited her out here in the vast, dark unknown? Could it truly be worse than the man hunting her? She fled one monster, straight towards perceived savagery, little knowing her only hope for survival, and an unexpected connection that would change everything, lay with the very Cheyenne warrior she'd been taught to fear. Elara had sought refuge, not romance, when the dusty stagecoach deposited her in Redemption Gulch 3 months earlier. She craved anonymity, a quiet corner in the world to mend the torn fabric of her past. Taking a small room above the mercantile owned by the kind, perpetually nervous Mrs. Gable, she kept her head down, her skills with a needle earning her keep, her past locked away behind guarded eyes. She moved through the town quietly, carefully, trying not to ripple the stagnant waters of the place. But Redemption Gulch wasn't peaceful, it was suffocated. The air itself felt thick with unspoken fear, clinging like the dust that coated every surface. The source was clear, Sheriff Caleb Brody. He ruled not with justice, but with the chilling efficiency of absolute control. He was a tall man, hard as the landscape, his eyes the color of a gathering storm, his hand always resting near the Colt peacemaker on his hip. Respect wasn't offered to him, it was extracted. A narrowed gaze, a deliberately soft-spoken threat. The way townsfolk flinched when his shadow fell near it was enough. Even before Elara truly felt his gaze upon her, she sensed the wrongness, the brittle tension beneath the town's weary facade. She saw the quick, averted glances, heard the conversations die when his spurs jingled on the boardwalk. This wasn't a town finding redemption. It was a town held captive. Her fragile anonymity shattered the day Brody's attention snagged on her in the mercantile. He'd entered, silencing the room as always, his gaze sweeping past everyone until it landed and stayed on Elara. It wasn't curiosity, it was assessment, ownership. New face, he'd stated, his voice deceptively mild, stepping closer than necessary. Keeping out of trouble, miss? Elara had merely nodded, her pulse suddenly erratic. Yes, Sheriff. His proximity was unnerving, his scent of dust, sweat, and power making her skin crawl. See that you do, he'd murmured, his eyes lingering on her face before he turned away. But the encounter left a residue of cold dread. She knew that look. She'd seen it before. In another life, she fought to forget. The look of a predator marking its prey. The quiet haven she'd sought had just revealed its hidden jaws. From that day on, Brody's presence was a constant weight. He manufactured reasons to cross her path, his eyes following her movements across the street, his compliments laced with possessiveness. He offered protection that felt like a tightening chain. Elara felt the town's fear coalesce around her. Friendly faces grew distant, conversations grew strained. Mrs. Gable's kindness became brittle, overshadowed by her terror of the sheriff. Elara was being deliberately, methodically isolated. Then came the evening. He cornered her in the alley beside the mercantile as dusk bled across the sky. He blocked her path to her room, his large frame eclipsing the fading light. "Evening, Elara," he said, the false pleasantry gone, replaced by something hard and final. "Sheriff," she replied, her voice tight, refusing to show the tremor that ran through her. Her hand instinctively clutched the small, beaded pouch hidden in her pocket. "This town, hard place for a woman alone," he stated, moving closer. "Needs a man. Needs stability. A wife is respectable. My wife." The words were cold iron. Not a question, a decree. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. "Sheriff, I cannot." His hand shot out, fingers biting into the flesh of her arm like steel traps. "I think you can," he whispered, his breath hot and laced with menace. A smart woman learns, and a vulnerable woman, well, accidents happen out here. He released her abruptly, leaving painful red marks. Think on it. Sunday. Be ready. He turned, his spurs ringing like a death knell on the steps. Trapped. The word echoed in the sudden silence. He hadn't asked. He had commanded, his authority the bars of her prison. Fear threatened to paralyze her, but beneath it, something else stirred. A cold, sharp focus born of past survival. Brody expected compliance. He expected tears, please. He didn't expect the quiet calculations already forming behind her eyes. The question wasn't if she would refuse, but how she would escape the cage before Sunday. The days that followed were a masterclass in Brody's cruel control. Deliveries meant for Elara vanished. Minor disputes were settled harshly against her. He publicly humiliated Jed, the young stable hand, merely for offering her a kind word, reinforcing her isolation. Brody made it clear she belonged to him, and anyone who challenged that would suffer. He thought he was breaking her. He was wrong. While appearing subdued, Elara watched him with an intensity hidden behind lowered lashes. She catalogued his routines, the late hours carousing at the saloon, the specific timing of his rounds, the almost superstitious way he checked the jailhouse locks. She noted his dismissive, yet vaguely fearful, references to the Cheyenne beyond the hills. Their danger might be my shield, the thought flickered. She began her own preparations, silent and secret. A bit of dried beef slipped into her pocket from the mercantile stores. A discarded water skin, mended stitch by careful stitch in the dead of night. A sharp paring knife, liberated from Mrs. Gable's kitchen, hidden beneath the loose floorboard in her room. She found herself recalling half-forgotten knowledge from her grandmother. How to move without sound, how to read the stars for direction, which plants offered sustenance, and which offered other uses. The quiet woman Brody saw was merely a facade over a core of hardened resilience he couldn't comprehend. She gathered not just supplies, but information, courage, and a desperate plan. She knew he was growing impatient. The storm was coming. It broke 2 nights later. Returning to her room in the oppressive darkness, she found Brody waiting directly outside her door, flanked by 2 thuggish deputies. He wasn't suggesting anymore. "Elara," he said, his voice flat final. "Time's up. The preacher expects us Sunday morning. My men will ensure you don't wander off before then." His eyes held a chilling certainty, a possessive gleam that stripped away any pretense of civility. "Don't disappoint me," he warned, before turning and leaving her under guard. Locked in her room, the shuffling boots of the deputies, just outside the thin door. Panic surged, hot and suffocating. Sunday. So soon. But the panic subsided, replaced by icy resolve. Tonight. It had to be tonight. Hours later, when the town finally succumbed to silence, and even the guards outside seemed lost in weary stillness, Elara moved. Soundlessly, she retrieved her hidden cache, food, water, knife, and a coil of thin rope pilfered earlier. The small beaded pouch, her only link to her grandmother, she secured around her neck. The window overlooking the dark alley was her only path. The drop was perilous, 12 feet to hard-packed earth. Securing the rope to the heavy bed frame, testing the knot until her knuckles were white, she eased the window open, praying the faint groan wasn't heard. Swinging her legs over the sill, the rough rope burned her palms as she lowered herself into the abyss. Which scraped her arms, muscles screamed, but she pushed past the pain. Her feet hit the ground with a muffled thud. Instantly, she crouched, melting into the shadows, every nerve alight. She didn't dare run yet. She moved like a wraith through the alleyways, skirting the edges of town, listening intently. A distant dog bark, the creak of a floorboard somewhere. Each sound was a potential alarm. Brody's rage upon finding her gone would be volcanic. Reaching the scrubland marking the town's boundary, she finally ran. Ran without looking back, pushing herself into the vast, swallowing darkness. The terrain was brutal, tearing at her clothes, tripping her feet, but the fear of Brody's hand on her arm again was a more potent fuel. Ahead lay the unknown dangers of the wilderness and Cheyenne territory, but behind lay certain damnation. She ran towards the forbidding hills, towards the cold indifference of the plains, praying for distance before the relentless sheriff realized his prize had flown the cage. 2 days became a blur of sun-scorched plains and freezing nights. Elara forced herself onward, driven by primal fear and dwindling hope. Hunger gnawed, thirst cracked her lips, exhaustion weighed down her limbs like lead. Her feet were raw, blistered messes, her body aching with cuts and bruises. The initial terror subsided into a dull, throbbing ache of despair. Had she escaped Brody only to die out here alone? On the 3rd morning, deep within a rocky ravine, her vision swimming, she stumbled. A sickening twist, a blinding bolt of pain from her ankle, and she crumpled to the dust. She cried out, trying to push herself up, but the agony was too great. Tears of exhaustion and hopelessness tracked dirty paths down her cheeks. This was the end. Brody wouldn't even need to find her. The wilderness itself had claimed her. Then a sound. Not the wind, not a coyote. The soft rhythm of unshod hooves on rock. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with renewed fear. On the ridge above, silhouetted against the harsh morning light, sat 3 riders. Cheyenne. Their faces were stern granite, eyes missing nothing as they observed her crumpled form. Bows were slung across their backs, lances rested easily in their hands. They radiated an aura of quiet, lethal competence. One rider, clearly the leader, nudged his painted pony forward, effortlessly navigating the descent towards her. He was young, lean, his long black hair held by a beaded headband, his movements fluid and controlled. He dismounted a few feet away, his gaze intense, assessing. His companions remained watchful on the ridge. Elara braced herself. From the sheriff's cruelty to this savagery, the townsfolk whispered of. There seemed no escape. The warrior knelt beside her, his silence more unnerving than any threat. His eyes noted her ragged state, the injury, the lingering terror in her gaze. Terror clearly not directed at him. Desperation overriding fear. Elara fumbled beneath her dress, pulling out the small, beaded pouch on its thin leather thong. She held it out, her hand shaking violently. "Help, please." Her voice was a dry rasp. The warrior's impassive face shifted, his gaze fixed on the pouch. He reached out, not taking it, but gently turning it in her trembling palm. His fingers brushed the intricate beadwork, a distinctive pattern, a hawk soaring against a stylized sun, rendered in blues, reds, and white. Recognition flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise. He looked from the pouch to her face, a silent question hanging in the air. "Where?" he asked finally, his English accented but clear, his voice low and resonant. "Did you get this?" "My grandmother," Elara whispered, swallowing against the dryness in her throat. "Long ago. She traded. With your people, I think. Near the broken mesas." His eyes held hers. Koda. That was the name whispered with wary respect, even in Redemption Gulch. He recognized the pattern. A design associated with a band his own family had known generations past, before the treaties were broken, before men like Brody poisoned the land with their greed. He saw the marks on her arm, the desperate flight in her eyes. He knew of Brody, the sheriff who pushed boundaries, who disrespected Cheyenne land and law. He straightened, speaking briefly in Cheyenne to his companions. They nodded. He turned back to Elara. "I am Koda," he said. "You run from Brody." A statement, not a question. "Yes," she breathed, relief hitting her like a physical blow. Koda nodded slowly. "We know him." His gaze dropped to her injured ankle. "He will hunt you. You cannot travel." He paused, his decision made, driven by old connections, by Brody's transgressions, perhaps by a warrior's code that recognized desperation and courage. "We take you to our camp. You will be safe for now." He offered a hand. "Can you stand?" Hope, fierce and unexpected, flooded Elara. Sanctuary, offered by the very people Brody despised. She nodded, tears welling, blurring the image of the warrior helping her gently to her feet, lifting her onto his pony. His touch was firm, respectful. In his cautious eyes, she saw not savagery, but honor. Her desperate flight had led her to the heart of perceived danger, only to find an unlikely protector. The real story, she suddenly understood, was just beginning. Koda's village, nestled in a hidden valley watered by a clear stream and shaded by cottonwoods, was a world away from Redemption Gulch. Teepees dotted the landscape, smoke rising lazily, the air filled with the sounds of life, children's laughter, the rhythmic thud of tools, quiet conversation. Elara's arrival on Koda's pony caused stares, murmurs of curiosity mixed with deep suspicion. She was an outsider, potentially trouble brought by the white man's world. Koda helped her dismount, his presence silencing overt hostility, though wary eyes followed her. He led her to a teepee slightly apart, entrusting her to Cheyenne, an elder woman whose face was a map of wisdom and resilience, her eyes sharp and appraising. Cheyenne examined Elara's swollen ankle with skilled hands, applying a pungent, soothing poultice and binding it expertly. Without wasted words, she offered water and food, her efficiency a shield against judgment. The following days were a quiet cocoon of healing. Confined mostly to Cheyenne's teepee, Elara slowly regained strength. Koda visited daily, sometimes bringing fresh game, sometimes just sitting in companionable silence, his presence a reassurance. Their communication grew beyond necessity. Elara learned basic Cheyenne phrases from Cheyenne. Koda practiced his English. He asked again about the beaded pouch. Elara shared fragmented memories of her grandmother, a woman living between worlds, respecting the land and its people, teaching Elara the secrets of herbs. Koda listened, recognizing landmarks, confirming old trade routes. The pouch wasn't just beadwork, it was history, a fragile thread connecting their disparate pasts. In turn, Elara learned about Koda, his leadership, his skill as a provider and protector, the weight of responsibility he carried for his people amidst shrinking lands and broken promises. His quiet integrity was a stark contrast to Brody's loud brutality. Respect grew between them, tentative but real. As her ankle healed, Elara cautiously joined the life of the camp. She helped Cheyenne, her mending skills appreciated, her knowledge of plants, learned from her grandmother, earning Cheyenne's grudging respect when she showed a better way to prepare a fever remedy. The children, initially wary, grew curious, then friendly. A small girl gifted her a carved bird, a simple act of acceptance that warmed Elara more than the prairie sun. For the first time since fleeing her old life, a fragile sense of belonging took root. But peace was precarious. Koda's scouts brought worrying news. Sheriff Brody was scouring the edges of Cheyenne territory, his patrols more frequent, more aggressive. His pride wouldn't let her disappearance go unchallenged. "He seeks you," Koda said grimly one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Men like Brody cannot tolerate defiance. To lose what they consider theirs, it is an unbearable insult. "I know," Elara whispered, the old fear momentarily returning. "I put you all in danger by being here." Koda turned, his gaze steady. "Brody disrespects the boundaries long before you arrived. Giving you shelter it is right, but it is also a stand against his arrogance." His eyes held a new depth. "He must not take you back." A bond, unspoken but powerful, had formed between them, a quiet understanding forged in shared defiance and growing affection. Elara saw in Koda the strength and honor she had never known. Koda saw in Elara a spirit as resilient as the wild grasses, a quiet courage that mirrored his own sense of duty. In this hidden valley, love was beginning to bloom, fragile and unexpected, even as Brody's shadow stretched longer, threatening the sanctuary they had found together. The confrontation was no longer a possibility. It was an inevitability. It came sooner than expected. Led by grim determination, Sheriff Brody and 3 deputies rode directly towards the camp, halting at the edge of the trees, a calculated intrusion. Koda, flanked by a dozen warriors armed and ready, walked out to meet them. Hidden just inside Chayton's teepee, Elara watched, her heart hammering against her ribs. Koda. Brody's voice was rough, arrogant. He spat contemptuously onto the sacred ground. Enough games. Give me the woman. Elara. Now. He scanned the teepees, his eyes hungry. Koda stood motionless, a figure of calm strength. This is Cheyenne land, Sheriff. Your authority ends where the grass meets the stone. Leave. Brody laughed harshly. My trackers ain't blind, savage. Her trail led straight here. Hand her over, or we search every one of these pathetic tents. His hand hovered near his gun. The air thickened, heavy with violence, waiting to erupt. But before Koda could respond, Elara stepped out into the sunlight. She couldn't hide while they risked everything. Her ankle protested, but she stood straight, meeting Brody's astonished, furious glare head-on. The fear was a cold knot inside, but it no longer controlled her. I am not yours, Sheriff Brody, she declared, her voice ringing clear across the clearing. I was never yours to claim. I am here because I choose to be. Brody's face contorted, turning a dangerous shade of purple. You, consorting with them. Get over here, woman. He started forward, hand outstretched possessively. Instantly, Koda was between them, a silent, immovable barrier. She stays. You defy me. Brody roared, his hand now tight on his Colt. His deputies shifted, suddenly aware of the silent, determined warriors surrounding them. It is you who defies agreement, Sheriff. Elara countered, her voice gaining strength. She remembered the whispers, the fear, the fragments of Brody's corruption she'd pieced together. Just like you defy the laws you supposedly enforce. Selling whiskey on protected land? Taking bribes from the freight runners? Skimming money from the town coffers? A stunned silence fell. Brody went white. His deputies exchanged uneasy glances. They knew. They'd look the other way. Koda's people listened intently. I saw your hidden ledger, Sheriff. Elara pressed, driving the nail home. Under the floorboards. The one detailing the kickbacks from the Bar T land grab you engineered. With a snarl of pure rage, Brody finally drew his weapon. Lying. Koda didn't draw. He spoke. In Cheyenne, but his tone, his gestures, the reactions of the deputies who understood enough. It was clear. He spoke of Brody's cowardice masked as bravado, his greed poisoning his badge, his disrespect for all laws, but his own desires. It was a verbal evisceration, stripping Brody bare in front of his men and the people he scorned. Brody flinched as if struck. One deputy pointedly looked away, refusing to meet the sheriff's desperate gaze. Sheriff, another deputy muttered, backing his horse nervously. Maybe we should go. This ain't our fight. Ain't our jurisdiction. Brody looked from Elara's unwavering stare to Koda's implacable presence, to his crumbling support, to the ring of warriors whose patience had clearly worn thin. He was defeated, not by bullets, but by truth and courage. With a strangled sound of pure, impotent fury directed squarely at Elara, he savagely wheeled his horse around. This isn't finished, he screamed, his voice cracking. You'll pay for this. He dug his spurs in, fleeing back towards Redemption Gulch, his deputies scrambling after him, leaving only shame and dust hanging in the air. A collective breath seemed to be released in the camp. Koda gently touched Elara's arm, a silent acknowledgement. She managed a shaky smile. The showdown hadn't been pistols at dawn, but something far more powerful. Brody's tyranny, built on fear, had shattered against the combined strength of an escaped woman finding her voice and a warrior defending his home and his honor. In the weeks that followed, the echoes of Brody's humiliation rippled back to Redemption Gulch. Elara's accusations, likely confirmed by Brody's rattled deputies, ignited long-simmering resentment among the townsfolk. Faced with open suspicion and the erosion of his fearful authority, Brody didn't wait for justice to find him. He vanished into the night, leaving Redemption Gulch to tentatively reclaim its name and its future. For Elara, the camp was no longer just a sanctuary. It was home. The danger she and Koda had faced together forged their bond into something deep and enduring. Love grew steadily, quietly, nurtured by mutual respect and shared moments under the vast prairie sky. He taught her the rhythms of the land. She shared her healing touch and listened to the burdens of his leadership. The beaded pouch, once a relic of a forgotten past, became a symbol of her journey. From hunted fugitive to cherished partner, she had fled brutality and found belonging where she least expected it. Standing beside Koda, watching the children play near the stream, Elara knew she wouldn't leave. Her path had been brutal, her survival hard-won, but escaping the sheriff's cage had led her to a freedom she hadn't known existed. Here, in the heart of the Cheyenne world, she had found not just safety, but love, purpose, and a strength she never knew she possessed. The wild frontier still held dangers, but Elara faced it now not alone, but as part of a people, her spirit as resilient and untamed as the land itself.